Hello, my name is Primitiva, and I study Pokemon, but not just any Pokemon, Pokemon from the ancient past. The world of Pokemon is such a diverse place, filled with unique biodiversity. Strange, magical-like creatures inhabit the skies, land, and seas. But what about the past? Before Pokeballs, before Pokebattles, and before even us. What was the world even like back then? Welcome to this new series that I've been planning for a while, called Paleomon. In this series, I compare Pokemon from the ancient past, and compare them to their real-life counterparts. And with that information, figure out when these Pokemon lived, and how they lived. After all, there's so much of the Pokemon world that we just don't know, so I think starting off with its roots is a fun topic to talk about. Beware though, this series will have a lot of nerdy terminology, which you might not immediately understand. But don't worry, I'll try to explain it at the best of my abilities. The ones I will be talking about today are the first fossil Pokemon in the National Dex, Omanyte and Omastar. These Pokemon are both based on Ammonites, as their names clearly suggest. However, Omanyte's Japanese name, Omagai, is a combination of Nautilus and Ammonite. So here arises our first question. Is Omanyte a Nautilus or a hybrid of some sorts? Well, no. I'll prove this by pointing to the Dex entries of Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire, stating that when it was attacked by an enemy, it withdrew into its shell for defense. Nautiluses are incapable of defending themselves this way. Instead, they protect themselves with a leathery hood that is on top of their head. Whereas Ammonites could actually suck themselves into their shells, and a flap called the Epicus would close up, protecting their soft bodies. Well, the facts are there. Omanyte and Omastar are not nautiloids, and they're just Ammonites, just like their names clearly suggest. Ammonites were marine mollusks in the subclass called Ammonidae, which was part of the larger class we all know today as cephalopods. They've been around for a very long time, first appearing in a period called the Devonian 409 million years ago. They diversified a lot and were found basically everywhere in every ocean. But, unfortunately, nothing can last forever, and the last Ammonites were wiped out along with the non-avian dinosaurs in the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event. You know, big meteorite. Unfortunately though, not much is known about their soft body parts, as they are very hard to fossilize, so it's not sure how many tentacles, arms, or legs it had in life. And yes, I did say arms and legs. Contrary to popular belief, octopuses don't actually have 8 tentacles. Instead, they have 6 arms and 2 legs. How it works is that it uses 6 of those arms for interacting with the environment, while it uses its 2 legs for walking around on the seafloor, using it as some sort of locomotion. However, squid and cuttlefish do have tentacles, you know, those little long ones that they have. They use these for catching and hunting prey. They even have little cute hooks on them. I mean, that's just way cool. Let's get back to octopuses though, because there's a very interesting Dex entry in Ultra Sun about Omastar, where it claims that it's an ancestor of artillery, of all things. Yeah. Now, of course, Ammonites didn't evolve into octopuses in the real world, that didn't happen whatsoever, but it's still very interesting to see this Dex entry. I suppose it may be possible if you consider Pokelogic of all things, but even then, how on earth do you explain Remoraid? Could it be that maybe Remoraid is some sort of hyper-advanced mimic octopus? Or is it perhaps some sort of weirdly inverted octopus, or a larvae of an octopus? I don't know. I guess I'll look into that another time. One really interesting thing though about most of Omastar's Dex entries is that they talk about it being extinct because its shell grew too big. Yeah. Which just sounds so bizarre. Like, okay, I can buy it if Omastar's shell gets too big and it couldn't swim anymore, but by then it already would have reproduced a whole lot and set forth many new generations of Ammonites. But the entire species dying off like this, that would take millions of years of very specific evolution that would actively hurt the Pokemon's survival. And evolution is literally about surviving. If a gene that is obsolete and doesn't help the species survive whatsoever, it becomes obsolete as soon as possible. So I don't know what was wrong with these paleontologists, because they must have seen this big-ass shell and must have thought something like, well, Chief, it's big, so let's just call it a day and say that it died because its shell grew too big, and then everyone went on a coffee break because they were too tired from working all day. And it was just left at that. You know, instead of just realizing that what actually wiped them out was just the Pokemon's version of the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event. I mean, I guess it's possible that Omastar evolved into artillery, but that's a really long stretch. But let's get back to their real-life inspiration. Ammonites grew to many different sizes, such as the very small Nanocardioceras from the late Jurassic, which generally weren't bigger than only 20 millimeters, no bigger than a thumbnail, and the enormous Parabusosia sepenrodensis from the late Cretaceous. Though it's missing some pieces, it is estimated to be around 2.55 meters, or perhaps even 3.5 meters in diameter. And when it comes to shell diversity, the Ammonites also had a pretty crazy range of shell shapes, especially the suborder called Ancylosauretina, or the more pronounceable name, which is Heteromorph Ammonites. The most distinctive features of these ammonites is that they didn't have regular boring spirals like most other ammonites. Instead, they had like super weird spiral shapes. Some examples are the Anolosoceras and the Nosoceras from the late Cretaceous, and way more. These weird but awesome creatures evolved during the late Jurassic, but were not common until the start of the Cretaceous period. You know, it's a real shame that such wonderful animals are extinct right now, as they look breathtakingly beautiful. Oh yeah, anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, Ammonite and Omastar. What kind of Ammonite species are they exactly? Well, I could just say that they're based on general Ammonites and call it a day, since that's probably what the designers had in mind. But no, I'm gonna go dig even deeper. I'm gonna find out exactly which Ammonite species most represent both Ammonite and Omastar. Okay, so I went through every single Ammonite genus I could find listed on Wikipedia, and I clicked on every single one of them to find out which ones fit Ammonite and Omastar the most. And after my research, I can definitely inform you that if Ammonite existed in real life, it would highly likely be in the genus Rhinochaia. Its shell reached a diameter of about 38 centimeters, which is really close to Ammonite's height, which is 40 centimeters. Now, I highly doubt that every single individual of Ammonite grew to 40 centimeters, but this is about as close as I can get it. But what about Omastar? Well, if Omastar existed in real life, it would likely be an Ammonite in the genus Acanthoceras. Now this one actually reached the exact size of Omastar, which is 1 meter. But that's not all. This genus also had a ribbed shell, emulating the spikes that Omastar has on its shell. Omastar probably evolved those spikes for a method of self-defense, but I'll get into that in a bit. Now, the only problem that arises is that both of these species lived in different times. However, they did both live in the Mesozoic era, which includes the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous period. So, we can just assume that in the Pokemon world, these two genuses evolved as one instead of two. But what would that have been like? Well, let's have a look at the potential evolution and lifestyle of this newly discovered species. Since Ammonites first appeared in the Devonian period, we can assume that Ammonite and Omastar may have been around that time. However, I'm inclined to believe that they just didn't show up at all until the Pokemon's version of the Middle Jurassic, just like the Rhinochaia genus. But it wouldn't be in the Rhinochaia genus, nor the Acanthoceras genus, but instead its own Ammonite and Omastar genus known as Omaceras. They would start out small, vulnerable, and soft, mostly feeding on plankton like Pokemon, but quickly grow an outer shell to protect themselves. Then they would start to swim using their siphuncle, a tube that ran through its spiral shell, just like Ammonites. This tube was used for expelling water and gases as the shell would grow, or to lower the density of the Ammonite's interior so that it would float up. This is also stated in some of Ammonite's dex entries. Another thing that its dex entries talk about is it using its 10 tentacles to move around. However, I think it's unlikely that these were actually 10 tentacles. I think it's more likely that they would have been 8 arms and 2 tentacles. While fully maturing, its body would change over time, gaining a more threatening appearance, a spikier shell, and 6 long extendable tentacles along with 2 legs and 2 arms. They would also generally live in the open seas, just like Ammonites. Omaceras would have fed on plankton like Pokemon when it's small, maybe even a Pokerus version. However, when it grew bigger, it would have hunted its own species, and sea lilies. Or, as we know them in the Pokemon world, Lileep and Cradily. Oh, and also Shellder, which is described in its Gold and Stadium 2 dex entries. Fun fact, the inspiration behind Cloyster are animals known as spiny oysters. Now, they're not actually oysters, but they have been around since the Triassic, which is actually before the Jurassic and Cretaceous, so it seems natural that Shellder must have lived during that time. Like Ammonites, Omoceras would have used jet propulsion to move around, which is a means of transportation where they would expel water through a funnel-like opening to propel themselves in the opposite direction. So kind of think of it using water gun or hydro pump underwater to propel itself forward, likely using water gun for normal speeds, but when it's in danger, it would use hydro pump to quickly get away from predator Pokemon. However, since Hydro Pump would likely cost a lot of energy, it could also use Withdraw to escape within its shell, or use Spike Cannon to shoot off its spikes to defend itself. Ammonites have also been found with ink sacs inside of them, so it's very likely that they could have used this for defense as well. But defend against who, you may ask? Well, Ammonites were generally preyed upon by bigger Ammonites, Mosasaurs, sharks, Plesiosaurs, and Ichthyosaurs. Now, since we don't have a Mosasaurus Pokemon yet, or an Ichthyosaurus Pokemon that would hunt Omoceras would include bigger kinds of its own species, of course, but also prehistoric species of Lapras who haven't yet developed a shell, kind of resembling a Plesiosaur, along with Sharpedo and Caracosta. Sharpedo because sharks have been around for a super long time, and they didn't really change that much since the Mesozoic. Caracosta because it's based on the Archelon turtle, the largest turtle known to man that lived in the late Cretaceous, and I can imagine a big creature like that would need a lot of energy to sustain itself. And finally, the ancestors of Gyarados, Huntail, and Gorebyss, just because I can imagine them being around at that time. Omoceras, just like their real-life counterpart, also had sexual dimorphism, where the female was bigger than the male. This is of course better for the female because it has more means to protect itself. Their lifespan is hard to figure out, because we don't really know much about the lifespan of Ammonites. However, I believe they probably lived about 4 to 6 years, which is definitely enough time to grow and reproduce, and therefore sending forth another beautiful generation of Omoceras. So in conclusion, Omoceras was a species of Pokemon that lived in the Middle Jurassic to late Cretaceous of the Pokemon world, and had a pretty good run in the history of the world of Pokemon, until a devastating meteorite wiped all of them out, alongside other fossil Pokemon we have yet to discover. It certainly wouldn't have died out because of its shell growing too big though. I still can't believe they put that in the games. And just like in real life, it only takes time to discover what other beautiful prehistoric fauna roamed the earth. So I'm very curious what the future of Pokemon will bring. And as you probably guessed, this is not the end of the series. No, no, no. There are many more awesome fossil Pokemon out there that need to be examined. Next up is Kabuto and Kabutops, which are certainly interesting. It's very obvious what Kabuto is based on, but I think Kabutops will surprise a lot of people. I absolutely loved writing this video and researching for it, so I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm really sorry it took so long, since I've been quite busy with a lot of stuff and other projects as well. But I really hope it came out on time, so if you're watching this in November, that means I did my job good. Anyway, be sure to follow my social media so you can keep up to date with all the videos and all the content I make. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe, because I got a lot of more similar projects in the works. I also have a Patreon, in case you want to help support the channel even more. You can get some pretty cool roles in my Discord, and there's some other sweet bonuses on there as well. So I recommend checking it out in the description below. I also have a Discord, so if you want to go in there and say hi to me, go check that out. Both my Patreon and my Discord are in the description below. And with that being said, I hope you all have a good day, night, or morning, and as always, take care!